I'm Pablo Martell, and this is Roads and Riches. Hey guys, welcome to the pod. I am super excited to bring you today's episode where we have Cody Riggs on, former NFL defensive back, where we're going to dive into his journey through college, where he was a standout at the University of Florida and Notre Dame, and into life in the NFL and into life transitioning out of the NFL and out of professional sports in general. We're going to talk a little bit about the NIL and its impact on college sports since he's left. And what's really cool is Cody and I actually go way back, having graduated from the same high school. So we're going to have a lot of fun with today's episode. If you guys are enjoying the pod, please consider subscribing, liking, commenting. Let us know how we're doing. And without further ado, here's the pod. Cody, great to see you, man. Thanks for joining the pod. So we go, I would say in air quotes, way back, right? Acquaintances in high school, really. Gosh, I remember running the scout team my senior year, right? That was oh man, that was so much fun. Let's go back, I guess, maybe to early childhood, right? I know you as a two-sport athlete. I know that, sports was obviously, I think, a big part of your life, for, growing up for a very long time and everything. So maybe let's go back to just kind of the beginning, early childhood, when sports and football in general maybe became, a really big part of your life.
Yeah. We won't say how far back we go. We'll leave that to them to guess. I grew up in a sports family, as you know. My father played sports. My brother played sports. My uncle played sports. All three of them made it professionally. So I kind of had no choice but to try to follow in their footsteps. And then my stepdad was a coach as well. So he got me into sports really early. As a matter of fact, my first sport was golf. A lot of people don't know that. I was watching TV one day and saw Peter work on TV and said, that's what I really want to do right there. And ended up going to Florida, obviously, in the end. But that's kind of where I got my passion for football. And then my stepdad was a track coach. So those are my two sports that I played growing up. And it was year round. It was nonstop. And through that, I think sports became more than just playing sports. Met all my best friends through playing sports. You get your confidence from playing sports. And I think it just becomes ingrained in you and is part of kind of your DNA going forward.
I think that's like such a good point. I think the confidence part, it's funny. We had actually had somebody on the pod not too long ago, incredibly successful entrepreneur and everything that, said, school wasn't for her and everything. But I think a big role that for her in particular and her, success was definitely that confidence piece. And I think that's something that sports, one of the many things that you can get out of it. Us going back, like I said, we knew each other, we're acquaintances and everything. I remember you as somebody that, you were a disciplined guy. I remember you as, you took even, in high school, what you were doing very seriously. You had, I think, goals. But I also think, even from the classroom standpoint, right? I also think that education was probably always something that was, pretty important, and probably something in your household and everything too. What was that like? I mean, how was that? Was it taken very seriously? I mean, guys that when they're so focused, and especially when you're young, there's so much that you don't know. And, there's so much that you think you're going to be able to accomplish and what, lies ahead when, things maybe come easy at a certain point. What was that balance like between school and being that dual sport athlete and everything? And how important was that to you?
Yeah, I credit that to my family. I have a phenomenal support system. And then most of my family is in the education system. Though my stepdad is a coach, he's also a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. have other family members that are teachers as well. So that's kind of where that came from, and then the discipline came from having a parent that was a coach. And I was at a young age, I knew I wanted to be something, and my parents basically were like, if you want to be that, you have to have the discipline. I remember even on Christmases, waking up and my dad looking at me and saying, "Did you go for a run today?" And it was like, this is at like 8, 9 years old. So I think that's kind of where it started and just carried on throughout my life. And even to this day, I still have to do my 5 a.m. workouts. Like that's just part of who I am. And they kind of instilled that in me at a young age.
I'm with you right there. The early
Yeah.
mornings to me are like that's my me time, my peace.
Yeah. What's
Definitely
your
the anchor.
what's your go-to workout at that time?
Oh, so I'm typically, I like to say I put my feet on the floor out of my bed at 4:30 a.m. That's kind of my goal. I would
That's the
say
hardest
most
part.
mornings. Hardest part's getting up, but definitely getting the feet on the floor, get up, and once you're up, it's I get to the gym. I get, first get the blood flowing. I'll do, treadmill, Stairmaster, whatever it is, kind of get it going. And then maybe, 15, 20 minutes and then right into weights. I
Yeah.
enjoy, still lifting and
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, the thing is that once you have kids and everything too, the timing gets, very compressed. I can't stay in there for, the hour and a half or, 2 hours and stuff. Got to hurry back home, get the kids ready for school
Absolutely.
and all that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it definitely anchors my day.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so at what point, I think with sports and everything too, there's, especially once you get to a point where you're able to play and compete at the level that obviously you played at, right? That at a certain point in your life, it's not something that just somebody else instills in you. Like, obviously there's a discipline part that you might get from, the outside sources from your father, your stepfather, the family support system, coaches, whatever it is. At a certain point, it's also something that you internalize and you're like, this is what I want to. And at what point did you feel like you made that decision and you were like, you just loved it and you were all in and this is what you want and you had your eyes set on, this is my ultimate goal? Do you
Yeah.
remember, I guess, at any point where you felt that?
Yeah, I actually do. It was my junior year of high school, because my freshman and sophomore year, I did play freshman football. I played JV football. I wasn't one of those kids that played varsity right away. And then my junior year, I had a breakout year, and you start getting these calls and these letters in the mail, and you start believing in yourself. And then it finally hit me. I went to, it was after my junior year, I went out to San Antonio, it was like this Army, like,
The
not
All-American game.
yeah, but it wasn't the game. It was like this like competition where you did one-on-ones with all the wide receivers across the country, and I
Yep.
really had my own, and that was my first taste of it. And I was like, okay, like I really can do this, and it was at that moment that I realized like I really wanted to push to play professional football. But before I was a good football player, but didn't know how good I could be up until that point.
That was that a point that gave you that confidence where you're like, all
Exactly.
right,
Exactly.
I'm among some of the best, and at this point in my life, and I can do this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
that's cool, especially that you have that moment where you're like that you have that realization, and you can see the writing on the wall. You're like that that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I guess let's start there then. Your junior year, senior year, right? Coming out of high school, this is, let's see, we're talking a different time of college football, right? Rules are totally different and everything, but you start that recruitment process. You're starting getting the calls, the letters and everything. So you have those last 2 years and stuff. What was that like? I mean, I know you had, I'm sure, plenty of opportunities and everything, especially once you got into your senior season. I know, obviously, we were fortunate enough to go to the school that we went to, be surrounded by the people we were surrounded by, have the quality of and the discipline of the coaching that we had around us. So I guess one is, what was it like going through that process? And two, who were some of the people when, you needed to make a decision that you remember kind of leaning on and being, somebody that you would look to for guidance as you were going through that process?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question. It was kind of surreal because it happened overnight. Like I said, I didn't play my sophomore year in varsity until the end of the season, and then my junior year, played the whole year and kind of had a breakout year and had made a bunch of plays. So then and then went to that camp out in San Antonio, and it kind of just happened overnight. So it felt like everything was just coming at you really fast, and you're trying to focus on school and you're trying to focus on things at home, and then all of a sudden you have these coaches calling you and they're putting pressure on you to make a decision. So you felt a lot of pressure in the moment, but at the same time you're super thankful that you're getting these opportunities. So it was like a mix of emotions. And at that time, you're so young, you don't really know how to process it. You're just trying to just make it to the next day or hoping you make the right decision. But that kind of leads me into answering your next question. Is I leaned on, like I mentioned earlier, I had people in my family that had gone through the process already. My uncle played football at Notre Dame. He was a highly recruited wide receiver. He actually went to St. Thomas as well. So I leaned on him. I leaned on my brother, who was a really good athlete coming out of high school. And then I also leaned on my stepfather. He was a big part in helping me make a decision and finding the perfect fit for me. I remember kind of going down the list and narrowing it down to 10 schools, then narrowing it down to 7 schools, and then getting down to 4 schools. And then I had like a final 3, and I made a decision from there. And we didn't do the whole thing that these kids are doing nowadays where they have the announcement. And I'm all for it because there's deals out there, there's NIL deals, and there's sponsorships they can get through doing that. But we kind of just decided one day at the house, we actually decided the night before my last high school game where I was going to school.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have so many good memories from all that time, especially
Yeah.
leading up to it, and then obviously then making that decision, and then for you it was going off to Florida. So you go off to Florida, went to a iconic SEC program. So what was the transition like from high school football into SEC college football on a big stage?
Again, I feel like this is a recurring theme: is the pressure.
Yeah.
When you get to the school, there's so much pressure on you to perform, and especially the environment that I went into. Florida was coming off of 2 national championships in the last 3 years, and there was a lot of expectations. Obviously, Tim Tebow had just left, and it was a transition period. So I think that was a lot to deal with, and then just you're on your own now. You make your own schedule. You get up and go to class, and it was just that combined with I don't know if you remember, I was very small in high school, so I had to put on a lot of weight. So being on like a meal program, trying to put on a ton of weight, going to class, trying to make sure you're in your playbook, it was just a lot to deal with when I first got to school. But at the same time, you learn a lot about yourself in that process because you're so independent at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's so good. Yeah, that transition for I think anyone. I mean, I know for me, I went and played very small school baseball, but just going away. I think for people that maybe even aren't playing sports, just that initial going away and having the freedom where it's where that initial discipline that's instilled that you find out a lot about yourself,
Absolutely.
sets you up for your future. So let's talk a little bit about then the school piece of this thing too, right? So go over to Florida. Florida is a phenomenal university. Actually, my sister and her husband, they're actually Bull Gators. They got season tickets. I try to make it up to the game, go tailgate and everything at least once a year.
Yeah.
My dad graduated from there, so I grew up in a big Gator household actually. And so knowing that, phenomenal school, obviously you have a lot of, I'm sure, pressures in the classroom as well, right? And you're also trying to, figure out what you're going to do and everything. But you still have this huge focus on sports and on football. And I think in your case, I mean, I think you did track and field also at Florida too, right?
No, I did not. I was listed on the roster for a couple of years while I was there. I guess maybe they assumed I was coming out because of all the things I did in high school for track.
Okay.
Because I was a much better track athlete in high school than I was a football player. But yeah, the money talks. So I wanted to play professional football.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was
I
listed
got
on the
you.
roster. Didn't do both sports.
Okay. Okay. So I guess what was it like managing, school and football, and what kind of focus and what kind of energy did you put on the school part, and as you kind of went through, freshman, sophomore, junior year and everything, was it you also trying to figure out what am I going to take seriously over here? What do I need to study? And obviously you have that goal of playing in the NFL,
Yeah.
that's like the top of the thing on your mind, right? But at the same time, everybody talks about the backup plan, well, what
Yeah.
if, and you don't ever even want to put those scenarios in your head.
Hmm.
But, what's that like, making that, balancing that
Hmm.
and, keeping that intense focus, there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. One of the things that I think the Florida football program and the academic department that deals with the athletes does really well is creating a balanced schedule for you. So I never felt like, I didn't have enough time. Like you had a schedule laid out for you. So obviously you would have your workouts and your practice and whatnot, but they would also have time set aside for you to go to tutoring and make sure that you're getting everything that you need for your classes. So they had a program laid out for us. Whether or not someone followed that program, that's up to them. But that was laid out for you. So you had kind of a regimen where you were kind of crossing out everything on your list. Now, getting enough sleep, that's another part of it. But you were booked out pretty much the entire day, and you had everything kind of set up for you to succeed, which was super helpful.
Yeah. And I'm sure, let's be honest too. You're in college. Also, you have that freedom. You also have, hopefully the days here or there, especially when you're, on those tight schedules where you're hopefully also trying to enjoy a little bit of like what it's like being a college student. You know, uh, staying out of trouble, but still, you got bunch of girls running around and you're a young guy, and I'm sure there's a lot of
Mm.
attention on you and all that, and you want to get out and have fun too.
Yeah.
It's a big balance. I guess after Florida, I know you also got you I guess real quick, sticking on the education front, right? So you also got a grad degree too, right? Did you end up
Correct.
getting master's?
I did. I got my master's from Notre Dame. So after my fourth year at Florida, graduated obviously, and then knew I wanted to transfer, and it was strictly for football. I think if, or I'm sorry, for education. If it wasn't for that fifth year wanting to go get my master's, I probably would have just left and went to the NFL. But I
Mm.
knew I wanted to get a master's. I had an extra year of eligibility. Had a medical red shirt my sophomore, no, my junior year. So I had that extra year. Knew I wanted to get that master's. So ended up, going to take my GMAT, got into Notre Dame's business school, and did my fifth year there while playing there, getting my master's.
Okay, got it.
Uh,
I guess what was it like moving from, and going from playing at Florida to Notre Dame? I mean, both huge programs and everything, and you probably feel obviously an allegiance and all that kind of thing. But what's that like?
Yeah, allegiance. I'm definitely a Gator at heart, but I'm very thankful for everything Notre Dame provided and still continues to provide. Everybody knows it's a phenomenal school, phenomenal people. Everybody's so willing to help. The network is amazing as well. But there's a lot of differences, completely different, cultures, and the SEC, and then this is an independent school that's kind of goes way back. Been winning championships for decades now. Um, but it was different. Um, but I had a different experience, more so from a maturity standpoint.
Yeah.
I was obviously a um, much older student than I was when I entered Florida. I was 18 years old versus being 22 years old at Notre Dame. So I was a much more mature person. My relationship with even the coaching staff was different. I was getting my master's, and you don't coaches aren't chasing you around, making sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. If anything, I was communicating to them before, like, hey, I
Mhm.
have this exam, or I need to go to this study hour, or I need an extra hour for this exam that I have. So my relationship was much different. It was much more mature, and I felt more so like, sorry, uh, a part of, not to say the staff, but more so like a mentorship role,
Yeah.
because I definitely was a
You're
resource.
carrying a leadership position. You probably
Exactly.
felt. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess before we get into obviously you transitioning to NFL and making it to that next level and stuff, let's talk about NIL for a second.
Uh,
So
it's a
this
sore
is
spot.
something that I bet. I mean, this came on the scene, you know, um, after your college days and everything. I guess how do you feel about it, and what do you think about it so far?
I think it's great. I do think the guys deserve to get paid. The guys and the women deserve to get paid, um, especially for something that has nothing to do with the school. If someone wants you to promote a product, you should absolutely be able to do so. Um, I do think there's some kinks that need to be worked out, but at the end of the day, I think overall it's positive for the game. It's positive for the students. But obviously, there's going to be some things that happen in the beginning. We've seen it now. We've seen uh, offers get revoked from students when they thought they were going to get it. We've seen a couple strange things happen from what I've seen. But overall, I think it's good for the kids. They do deserve to get paid, and I remember being a college student and not having much money to work with, and it would have been nice to be able to make a post on social media and be able to get yourself some lunch or get yourself some clothes or whatnot.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I agree with you. I think that I think with anything new or with anything that where there's change, it's never going to be perfect, especially in the beginning. And they got to iron, obviously a lot of things out. But the good thing is that I mean, I do think it's trending in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to get these guys and girls, um, you know, um, giving them these opportunities,
Yeah.
I think is huge. But I think too is taking a step further to look at, I think, a lot of the good about it. We're both, kind of in the finance industry and in general finance accounting. And something that I think gets criticized a lot is, personal finance, personal financial education in in just the education system in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is one of those things where, um, there are things that you learn on the fly, things that you learn by doing rather than out of a textbook or somebody telling you.
Right.
And this is one of those opportunities for I think a lot of these young athletes where they can come into some unique opportunities, but it's a learning experience, maybe without them even knowing it, because now
Yeah.
they have to figure out, hey, what does this mean for me, for a tax perspective? And they probably don't even realize it. I'm sure some of them until maybe 3 weeks before they have a tax return due, and they're like, wait, what? And I got to do, XYZ, and and
Yeah.
hopefully they have good support systems around them. And I'm sure that the universities, at least I hope, are putting systems in place to maybe give them guidance and help them with this stuff. But I think on the good side, it's probably helping them a lot from just an overall education perspective on how certain things really in life after school work, especially if they don't have, let's say an internship, or they're not starting into their first job until after graduation. This is one of those things where they're going to start learning how to manage these things, which I think that's a big plus.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah,
you
I
know
agree. And they're getting exposure to things that they, especially the athletes, that they wouldn't have gotten exposure to until they finished
yep.
playing in college and are making an actual paycheck and filing your taxes at 18, 19 years old. I
Yep.
think it's super beneficial to somebody as opposed to having to do it when you're 22 and kind of everything happens all at once.
Yep. Yeah, I'll never forget. Man, years ago, I remember listening to, I think it was like an interview with Mark Cuban, and he was talking about how he had just drafted, the Mavs had just drafted somebody out of Duke, and I think he was maybe a 1 year guy at Duke, and I remember him just like kind of beating up on the system in general a little bit about how he's like, man, I just got this guy, we just picked him up from Duke, and he's calling me asking me, how do I lease an apartment, and wait, how do I get the bank account open and all this stuff, and he's like, he went to Duke, like, this is
Yeah.
a huge university. And,
Yes.
but, I think it speaks volumes about, things that can be improved, in
Yeah.
general, I think for, a lot of these, guys and girls.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, hopefully you're not too bitter about it. I mean, it's,
Yeah, not too bitter. And it's not even for me. I just look at some of the guys that I played with, and I'm just like, man, like it would have been nice to see what he could have
yeah,
done with
yeah,
NIL.
Yeah.
That's more so where I come from. I mean, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have had some major NIL deal, but I just think of the guys I played with, like,
Yeah.
would have been really cool to see the
For
opportunity that I had.
for sure. I mean, I think too, especially just in sports in general. One of the things that many of the things that I like about sports, one of them is that it's one of these things where you get such a diverse group of guys with so many different backgrounds. Like, we were talking about how, we're definitely fortunate enough to come from, one, the school we came from, but also the families, like I know, I'm very thankful for definitely the sports system I had around me, as I know you are and stuff. And there were some guys that came up that, they didn't have that.
Hmm.
But they were tremendous athletes. This was something they did have. This was something, and when you're banging your body up, you're getting a little bit older and stuff like that. When you have those those pinnacle years and you have those opportunities, I mean, I think that's also another huge plus for some of these guys where you know maybe they didn't have those support systems. Maybe they're not the best students, and that's all a function of I think some of the influences and things that they had in their life. And I think that's another huge positive from it. And so, definitely big plus.
Hmm.
Um, I think another thing about NIL that I want to touch on here too, where there's this overlap in the business world for a second, in just like a greater, in my opinion, just kind of trend, which is this whole personal branding thing, right? We're living in a digital world, a digital first world, right? You're in San Antonio right now, I think.
Houston,
You're in Houston. I'm in
yes.
South Florida, right? Like this is the world we live in, right? And um, I think that NIL is one of those things too, where um, there is, I think, opportunities and where you're obviously for the NIL, purposes in general, you have name, image, likeness, right? And it's focused on you. It's focused on one, let's say, person, right? But you're also part of this bigger machine, right? And in this case, in college, it's a team, and in the corporate world, it's you may be part of a larger organization. But there's still this like big focus on personal brand, and I think how you manage those two things, not being me, I, and still being a team player. But, there's like this crossover. How do you use yourself to benefit, a greater organization? And this is one of those things that I think there's a lot of big organizations that are still trying to figure that out. And that they're trying to go through all the red lines on their compliance, stuff. And, how do we manage this? This is new territory for us. And there's going to be, smaller organizations, new organizations are going to be able to grow with a different culture and things that are going to maybe put a big emphasis on this. I'm starting to see that a lot, in the small business community and stuff, and some, companies that are growing, and they're putting this big emphasis on this personal brand.
Hmm.
Um, I guess you're in the professional, world. You're, in financial services and everything. What are you seeing, and how are you thinking about that?
It's funny you say that. I kind of look at your social media and I see the things that you're doing and how you're standing out. And, I'm still trying to figure out how the best way for myself to stand out amongst an industry, a very old industry. And I think organizations are starting to like loosen up a little bit and kind of let their employees really be themselves, especially through things like LinkedIn. I think it's a unique opportunity right now because the first thing people when someone hears about you, the first thing they do is Google you or they look at your LinkedIn or your social media, and that's your first impression. Your first impression is no longer shaking somebody's hand. It's they look at your social media and see what are you posting, like, and that's how they figure out who you are. So I think it's a really cool opportunity now to kind of show exactly who you are through social media. And that's a unique balance. Like it's because you can make a post that you think it's gonna hit the way you want it to hit, but in reality, people may interpret it completely different than how you wanted it interpreted. So, so I think this personal brand, it's like it's a cool time to figure out just how to convey who you really are because the way you say something just may not be taken
Yeah.
in like you want it to be taken in. And I think you've done a great job of that, showing kind of your personality on your socials to really give people a glimpse into what it would be like to work with you and what your personality is like.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things that I know even for me, like, it being new, I think one of the things that I told you too is that like right when you start doing it, right when you start putting yourself out there, man, it's intimidating. It's scary. It's like, you have to build up a confidence and to be able to go and do that. Cause like the first thing that you put out there, the first picture you put out of yourself, you're just sitting there internalizing like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? And oh my gosh, I look so stupid. And, whatever. And you have to push that out of your head. And I realized, I think one, by looking at others too, that are doing it, that it's not about that. Everybody really is focused on themselves. They're all thinking about, themselves, not thinking about,
Yeah.
Me or you. And,
Right.
and I'll tell you too, I mean, look, I certainly don't have, a huge, following by any stretch of the imagination. I've built up, quite a few, new followers and stuff ever since I started getting active on social media, which was maybe 5-6 months ago. But even in just the very small capacity that I have with, the very, really limited following at this point, man, the benefits have been incredible. It's just so many cool people that I've been in touch with. I mean, you and I really got connected as a function of social media. We had a mutual friend, actually, somebody that graduated with us from high school that ultimately connected us, which I think is really cool. And that was all a function of me having put stuff out there.
Yeah.
And it's been a really cool experience. So yeah, for anybody that's out there that's thinking about it, highly encourage them to do it. It will feel weird, it will feel awkward, uh, but overall the benefits are great. It's great being able to connect with people and learn more about people and everything.
And at the end of the day, I feel like you're trying to solve problems, and though it may
Yeah.
feel awkward, it's helpful to people. So people
Yeah.
they're gonna receive it in a positive light.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think, even going back to the kind of this NIL kind of analogy or like overlap that I was trying to make, even with, corporate and NIL, and how you find that sweet spot between, you know, really not just it being about you and elevating yourself, but, using yourself as a tool to, benefit, a larger team and a larger organization, in general. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, shedding a good light, hopefully, on yourself and on whoever you're representing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that actually brings me into, I think, something else. And I think just a function of, us, going back how far we do it and everything is that, keep in mind, for everybody, it's like, you never know when your paths are going to cross with somebody again,
Yeah.
which I think is so cool. Um, so I guess let's transition now back to Cody's coming out of college. He's making this transition now to NFL to become a professional athlete. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I guess give us a little bit of insight and kind of like what's that like now? What's that next step? Coming out of school and chasing the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. My last year in college didn't go how I wanted it to go. Um, I was playing really well for the first couple of games of the year, and then ended up having like a stress reaction in my foot, which set me back up until the bowl game. So I missed the final 5 games of the year, and definitely hurt my draft stock. I do feel like it was a chance I could have gotten drafted if I didn't get hurt, and I would have finished the season strong as I started it off. But that wasn't in the cards. So went undrafted, which was very stressful at the time. And then even at my pro day, like I pulled my hamstring at my pro day. Like it just was like things were like just piling on, and like thankful that I was in grad school, so I was like, okay, at least I have this to fall back on. But that last year just didn't go how I wanted it to go. Got a call from the Titans. Went into training camp, and I was like full go. Like I was like, I don't care what happens, I'm gonna make this team no matter what. And I was able to, and in that process, like learned a lot about myself because I came in and went into Florida as a highly recruited athlete, went to Notre Dame as a former captain at Florida, and started every game my last year at Florida. Went into Notre Dame as a starter, and then I come into the Titans, and you see the depth chart, and you're the 8th corner on the roster, and you're just like, man, it's going to be an uphill battle. But it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me, you know, I leaned on the discipline that we spoke about that I got from my stepdad and my family. Um, and it was a grind. It was nonstop. And I think the part that shocked me the most when I transitioned to the NFL was just the wear and tear on your body. And as an undrafted free agent, I'm not sitting out of preseason games. So because that year I made the 53-man roster, I played in almost every game. You know, I had basically a 20 game season. I had 4 preseason games and then 16 NFL games. So by the time the season was done, my body was just, I mean, completely shot.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized, like, oh man, you really have to. You know, they talk about people like LeBron James who spend over $1 million on their body a year, and you have to. You have to spend a lot of money on your body because it's a lot of wear and tear. And you know, every game is like getting in almost like a car accident, based off how hard you're getting hit, how hard your body's whiplashing with certain things that happen in a football game. You know, banging knees with people. You know, getting hit in the stomach, and all that stuff happens. And 20 times in a span of 4 months, that was happening. And so that process really taught me a lot about just taking care of my body and making sure that I'm doing the things I need to do to be healthy for the following season. I think after the season, I couldn't even jog for like a week. I had to work my way
Wow.
up to because my body was just that shot.
So you finish off that first year. I mean, you had that uphill battle. Incredible. I mean, you fought your way in,
Uh-huh.
and you finish up this long year now. And I know you were Tennessee. I think did you end up spending a little time that next season with, was it the Bucks, or were you making a decision at that point like, do I want to continue doing this?
Yeah, that was a little out. So I played for Tennessee for 1 year, then I played for the Tennessee the second year. Ended up getting released later on in the year. Signed with Tampa for the last few games of the year, and then was on Tampa's practice squad the following year. Um, and then made the decision to finally leave football after I played in it was the AAF. I don't know if you remember that football league. It was a lot
Okay.
of fun.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
played in that for a year. And then after that, it was like I'm not going to wait around for a call. Like I have a degree, I have a master's degree. Like it's time to move on.
How hard was it to make that decision?
Um, it was tough. But at the end of the day, if no one's calling, it makes the decision a lot easier. So, you know, I know guys that will sit around and wait for a call. Like I said, I knew I had something to fall back on, and I also knew like there was a time was ticking on that. And you know, you have this master's, and it's great to have it, but if you haven't used it, if you haven't utilized it and gone into a profession at some point, it becomes a little outdated. So I knew I had a decision to make. I was kind of at a crossroads. Do I sit here and try to shoot for the stars with this with football, or do I go ahead and transition into the next phase of life? And I decided on the latter.
Yeah. So coming out of professional sports, now you're at another kind of, moment in time where, everything that you knew for really a majority of your life is now, it's changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something I recently told you that I've seen is, and again, obviously on very different levels, but I was fortunate enough to play baseball at a fairly high level. I had some buddies and some friends and some, teammates that, they got drafted, they made it into the minors. And, when the day comes that it's all over
Mm-hmm.
and it is time for this, the next phase of life. Um, it's interesting because it's almost like you've lost out on a few years, let's say, of
Mm-hmm.
going into maybe this career that you would have otherwise gone into a lot earlier had it not been for this dream you're chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of guys it can be guys and girls, it can be extremely discouraging. And I just from the outside looking in, I can only imagine, and I've seen it, I think, from even some guys that I know, that it's like, they don't go chase some other career or something else, and they kind of let life take them, rather than them kind of really attacking it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's really sad to see, you hate seeing that sometimes. And a lot of really good guys, I think a lot of good guys and girls can kind of fall into that. It's really unfortunate. So what are some of those, some of the things that you did, and kind of what was that like
Mm-hmm.
to move into this, to a new industry,
Mm-hmm.
something where you got to learn really quick, and at the end of the day, you're always competing, right? And you're probably looking at, like, I've got peers that I'm competing with, and oh man, this guy over here, maybe he's my same age, but he's been doing this for 5 years, and now I'm on day one. What's that like?
Yeah, it's discouraging is part of it, but I think a lot of it's intimidating.
Yeah.
Um, and it's tough as an athlete to kind of go from, in reality, in my career, I was the youngest person in most of these rooms, and then you switch careers, and all of a sudden you're the oldest person with the least amount of experience. It was a weird dynamic to digest, but the things I was doing when I was playing, I'm very thankful again for the support system I had. I had an uncle, or I have an uncle, who was doubled as my uncle and my agent, actually. But he was very adamant on me going and meeting people during the off season. So I remember going to New York and meeting with someone from one of the big four accounting firms and shadowing them for a day. I remember going to LA and shadowing somebody at a large bank who was an investment banker. I remember shadowing somebody who was a wealth advisor at a large firm. I was doing these things in my off season to try to plant the seeds so that when I was done playing football, I at least had something out there for me. Um, and I remember that really, really thinking about it during that time when I felt like I couldn't even run. And after my first season, I was like, yeah, I don't know how many seasons of this I can put up with because it was so painful. So I was doing those things early on. I guess my advice would be for guys to do that in your off seasons, making sure you're taking advantage of all the opportunities. I remember the NFL had this like 3-day internship at the front office or at the headquarters in New York. And I was like, absolutely, I'm signing up for that. Like, why not? It's free. You can go just shadow people at the NFL headquarters. Like, why not? And so I was trying to take advantage of all those opportunities while I was playing because I saw like, hey, this can end at any moment. Like, what if I feel that way after the season next year and I can't run the same as I can? Like, what am I supposed to do? So I knew early on that I was going to have a transition from football and wasn't afraid of it. More so, like you said, I attacked it. But there's guys that kind of just, I mean, this life and the money and the attention you get, it can consume you. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why they don't look for other opportunities elsewhere. But also, it's like a stigma that if you're focusing on that, you're not focusing on football. You're either all in or you're not. And
Yeah.
I do think you can do both.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen a lot more of it lately too, with, even guys that are in the league that are, I think just being more outspoken about other things that they're doing outside of football. Obviously you got, the guys that, they're it's important on the giving back part, right? The charities and the other things that they're involved with, whether it's being given back to a community, younger generation, whatever it is, which is super important. But a lot of other guys too, really, taking the reins and focusing on, how do I set myself up and how do I set my life up for life after? And I think that's really important. It's funny. I know that on, in the, Twitter real estate community, you got like, I think it's Justin Puig, right? He's a big guy on there. He's always talking about how he's, trying to learn the ropes and, building a portfolio and learning about real estate investing in general. We chatted a little bit about one of your ex teammates, Jeff Driscoll, who I
Mm-hmm.
know is, getting really big into the SMB acquisition world, which I think is really cool. And he seems like he's kind of, being pretty outspoken about it. And, I think I think a lot of that will obviously transition to hopefully a lot of guys in the league and a lot of guys in sports in general, and how they're thinking about, life after sports.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in new role. I think you did some time doing some accounting, and then obviously eventually you got into the financial services industry as well. What's that been like so far, and how you enjoying it?
It's been great. I think there's a lot of parallels between the skills that you have from playing sports in this industry, which I think allows for an easier transition for most guys in this industry. It's very competitive. It requires you to be very disciplined, very diligent in what you're doing, very detail oriented. So I think it's been a great, I don't know, new role for me. I think I told you I went the accounting route at first. Wondered if I wanted to do that. I liked what I was doing, but it wasn't fully filling my cup. Got my first exposure to this, and I knew right away. I was like, this is what I want to do. I enjoy. We have the firm I'm at. We have teams that we work on, and I get not only the team aspect, but I get the competitive aspect with it as well. So it really checks all the boxes for me. And then I just enjoy solving complex problems, and I think that aspect, leads to like large projects we're working on for clients, making the complex things seem easy to them, and helping them navigate either coming into New Wealth or handling a large amount of money that maybe they didn't have before.
Right. Yeah. And I got to imagine too, in your role now, I mean, have you been able to, or are you at a point where you're starting to, I guess, really look back into some of that network and even some of the younger guys that you knew as they were coming up, and part of you, let's just say, even giving back and kind of coaching and helping them and everything. Have you started creating some time for that as well, especially now in the capacity that you're in?
Yeah, not as much the guys that are coming into New Wealth. I'm more so focusing right now on guys that are transitioning out of football, not from a business standpoint, more so just from a passion standpoint. A lot of the guys that are done playing, I love to help them reach their next step. And so, with the NIL stuff, there's kids that I've given advice to and said, this is what you maybe should be looking at. But a lot of the guys that are transitioning out of sports, I identify with, and I know what that feels like. So really being kind of just a sounding board for them as they transition out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess as we wrap up here, what's next for Cody Riggs? What does the future hold, and what do you got your eyes set on?
For me, I'm really leaning into my passion. So fitness is number one. So trying to compete in as many random race type events that I can. Coming into my own in Houston, being an advisor here is something I'm excited to be doing in the future. I'm a senior associate now, but I'm looking forward to making that transition into having my own practice, and just setting roots in Houston. Moved here to be with family. Really enjoy the city, being in a new place, and excited to see where I'm at a couple years from now.
It's awesome. Anybody wants to find you, get a hold of you, learn more about you, where can they hit you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I have no social media outside of LinkedIn, so that's really the only place you can find me. And feel free to reach out to you, reach out to Pablo if you want to get in touch with me. But yeah, that's Definitely. Pretty much. I shut down all my socials for the past few years, and it's been refreshing.
I bet. That's awesome. Well, Cody, this has been great. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story and everything. And, hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, no, we should. I appreciate you having me.
All right, man. Chat.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Roads and Riches podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting. Let us know how we're doing. And if you're an individual or a business that's in need of accounting services, maybe you're in the market for a new CPA, whether it be tax, accounting, fractional CFO services for your business, or transaction advisory services if you're contemplating a transaction, you should consider using Alpine Mar, the CPA firm that's redefining the accounting industry. You can head on over to alpinemar.com or roadsandriches.com to learn more about us and find a contact form to get in touch. Find out if we can be a good fit for you. We'll see you next time on the Roads and Riches pod.